But it's an absolute pleasure to welcome someone who now I call a good friend. And we've only conducted business through the agency of EduSpark and many conversations. And he's got some beautiful work, absolutely gorgeous work around metacognition, as you both know here in the session. And for those who are watching this asynchronously, maybe in the YouTube channel or back in EduSpark itself. And so, welcome, Marcelo. I'd love you to start with, how did you get to this point here? A bit of a summary of how you started, how did you come into education, and then why this approach about learning to learn. A really funny, a really interesting and fabulous story.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for that wonderful introduction. And it really does mean so much to be here with you discussing the joy of not knowing and its philosophy and its practical approach. And I feel so honored and so privileged to be part of the EduSpark community now. I think it's a tremendous initiative that you and Craig have set up, and it's a real joy and a real pleasure to be part of it. So thank you so much for inviting me today. Thank you so much for the live audience that's joining us for a lovely discussion. And and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the kind of the story so far that's led to where we are now. So I have quite an interesting story, Andrew, that is quite unconventional, I would say, in terms of coming into education, because I arrived in England in 1976 without speaking a word of English. We moved from Buenos Aires in Argentina. Then went to secondary school in North London, which I enjoyed enormously. And then went on to the University of Sussex to do a degree in environmental science. And from that degree, I then went on to do a PhD at the London Hospital. So as a research scientist in biochemistry, looking at liver cells then, which then led to a mini career as a research scientist. I moved to Bristol and did some 5 years of postdoc, looking then at red blood cells, which was really fascinating. So I was going through that kind of career as a research scientist until um, one of those moments in life where I think was very much prompted by the birth of our first child, Emily, that kind of then pointed toward, that deep thinking of the future and I guess a more certain, more definite, more secure, less uncertain career. And I've always loved education. I've always loved teaching. I've always loved being within the primary setting. I'd done a lot of volunteering and so on during my time at school. So I decided to change and do a PGCE in Bristol, which was just a teacher training program in primary, which was just such a fantastic year, a great experience, and enjoyed every single moment of it. And then a series of very lucky, very fortunate events followed with both the school where I was doing my final practice, which is Hotwells Primary School, and then my first school as an NQT, Christchurch Primary, and the one after that, 3 years after, Westbury Park. There were just such instrumental places where so much was happening, so much vibrancy in terms of trying to experiment, trying to see, trying to gauge um, what the best conditions in the classroom would be to inspire children. It was sort of late 1990s, early 2000s, where there was such well, at least in those schools and with those fantastic heads, there was a real sense of what I think I call intellectual, professional freedom, where there was a lot of discussion, a lot of chat, a lot of networking. I met some amazing people at that very early in my career at that time, who were doing very exciting things. And then that sense of freedom to be able to implement those things within the daily life of the classroom was tremendously exciting. And that's when I got very, very involved in the world of thinking skills, creative thinking. A fantastic project on lifelong learning with the University of Bristol, which is now led to really kind of instrumental aspects of developing lifelong learning dispositions within the primary education. Very, very involved with philosophy for children at that time, and I joined the board of SAPARE very early in my career. Worked very close with Deborah Eyre on the Gifted and Talented think tank at the University of Warwick. So there was just so much excitement and ability to experiment and to see what the children thrived with. That's the main thing that I saw at that time. There were things that you immediately did with the children in the class that you could see that sense of enjoyment, enthusiasm, inspiration, intrinsic motivation, that sense of thriving without them having to feel that there was effort involved, that sense of naturalness, which is absolutely wonderful. And that paved the way for them when we moved back to Brighton, as my wife got a job back in Brighton. So we moved to Brighton, where I had gone to university, and I took the opportunity to move on to senior leadership. So that was really interesting. I became the deputy head of a school in Brighton, and then their head teacher of a couple of schools here in Brighton. And that was really incredible because taking on what was now developing as a real pedagogical strategy, and then in the classroom, and taking that on to then be the substantial philosophy and ethos of a whole school was just tremendous, and developing that along with the children and the staff was just fantastic. And then at Hertford Infants, during the headship there, the phraseology and the whole philosophy of education, as it is now known, the joy of not knowing, arose not just in principle, but also hugely in practice. And post headship, I thought it would be a fantastic idea, having collected so many wonderful moments in education. This is what it is there was moments that were so special, both with the children, with families, with the staff, that I thought it'd be great to then capture all that and put it together within the context of a book. And I'm delighted to say that Routledge and the lovely Bruce Roberts as an editor made that dream come true. And it's now, as you can see behind me, came out last year. It's called The Joy of Not Knowing, and it's given me so much pleasure to see how practitioners across not just primary but across all entities of education and sometimes beyond education are finding that the messages, the themes really resonate and really align with exciting things that people may want to implement. And they're all ideas that really allow people to build on what they're already doing. So it's the opposite to a bespoke program, I guess. It's just all ideas that adapt to everyone's ethos, values, visions, and enable very exciting cultures to be created in which children and staff and families can thrive, and very importantly, can thrive emotionally, socially, cognitively, and as you know, Andrew, in chapter 11, also culturally and multilingually, which is a real interest of mine. That sense of being able to use all the richness, the cultural and linguistic richness that every child brings with them into the classroom, and use that, capture that, and use it to drive the learning and the engagement in the classroom. And incredibly, Andrew, and today, yesterday is a momentous time for me that I have now, from yesterday, I've become a lecturer in education at the University of Sussex on the BA in Primary Early Years program, where I was a student in 84 to 87. And it just feels incredible that the last 2 years I have been at Sussex on the course, but now it's become a permanent position. So I'm absolutely delighted, and to be able to now share all these ideas with the next generation of teachers, but also to be, through you, mainly through the wonderful work that you and Craig are doing, and various other people connected with, that sense of having got to the stage where these conversations are now global is tremendously exciting, and learning from so many people and constantly adapting. I just only, before this recording started, met Sophie in the audience, that's joined us today, and already in those 5-10 minutes we had, I just feel so inspired by the way that Sophie was describing her use of colors within the classroom. There's always so much to integrate, and so much alignment, and so much uh, points for mutual discussion and building on everyone's ideas. The same with Vidya, who's also in our audience today. The Vidya's network within India and America, she's got the professional learning network that Vidya runs, is so inspirational. I really recommend everyone to find Vidya on Twitter
I'll
and
get her
connect and
to,
form part of that.
if she's happy, I'll get her
So,
to add some contact details there, or if not,
yes.
certainly catch up with us. Marcel, I'm
Yeah.
mindful of time, but and look, I agree with everything you say. The thing with you and Sophie as a discoverable thing, as an example, is the hugely disaggregated world of professional thought leadership in education. And one of the missions we've got is to bring that together as a faculty. But this is all about you, not so much about EduSpark. What I'm keen to move into is that gap between the knowing and the not knowing that you so beautifully put. And to frame that, it's something I said in the pre-warm-up, that a lot of people are not attracted to metacognition on the basis that it's not practical. It's hard to implement. It's just too big, sort of a mind thing for some people. And both you and Sophie have got some beautifully practical ways of implementing. So the central model, and I'm doing this for a reason, and you'll see why.
Yes.
Talk to us about that gap of moving from not knowing to knowing.
So interesting, Andrew. I always love the way that your insight and the way that you phrase this and you look at things is absolutely fascinating. Yeah, for me, it's so exciting, Andrew, to look to explicitly consider the difference that exists between knowing and not knowing within the educational system. Is just really fascinating, because traditionally, and many children's view of education is that they have to go to they go to school to gain knowledge. But what is really interesting is to then unpick how that knowledge is acquired. So that's the bit that I'm really interested in. How do we enable that knowledge to be acquired. And what I find fascinating is that in order for that knowledge to be acquired, it is essential to remove barriers to the learning and to the knowledge being acquired in the first place. So I'm really fascinated in the conditions that we create that remove those barriers to acquiring the knowledge in the first place, because otherwise we keep trying and trying and trying, and the knowledge is not being acquired just because there are barriers before the learning starts. And that's what led me to kind of create the phraseology of the joy of not knowing, because if we get the children to understand from very, very early on, and the earlier the better, and as we said, the younger the children are, the easier they find it to deal with difficult concepts. If we get them to re-understand that in order to learn something new, in order to acquire some knowledge, we must start in a position of not knowing it. It's really, really fascinating, and although it sounds very simple, is very transformational, because students and adults don't usually give themselves the freedom, the ability, the comfort of enjoying the time of at which they find when they find themselves in a position of not knowing, because they don't realize that is by definition where they must be in order to learn something new. So making that very, very explicit with the children from the beginning is very transformational. And if I just share with the audience and with you that diagram that you were referring to. Can you see the screen now? Yes, fantastic. So as you were saying, and Andrew, and I love the focus that you've given to today's session and the conversation in terms of the metacognitive aspect of school and education, the kind of awareness that the opportunities that we provide or during the daily routine of the classroom for children to be aware of their learning process, of the process that they're going through as a learner, is really, really fascinating. And when we present them with these 6 steps that break down the process of learning from a very early age, it is something that then enables them all to want to launch into the learning without fear, worry, and anxiety that's usually present when they find themselves in a situation of not knowing. And it's really, it's really fascinating, because number 1 represents the launch of the start of the learning process. But what really fascinates me so much, Andrew, and that's so key to today's session, to the book, to the whole approach, is how we ensure that a child gets to this stage, or is at this stage, or an adult for that matter, not feeling anxious and not feeling worried that they don't know. And that's really, really interesting. And that's what the Learning to Learn Week idea, where school launches the academic year with devoting the first week to a joint Learning to Learn Week, where we equip all the children with all the dispositions, skills, attitudes, characteristics, methodologies that makes them feel safe and makes them feel secure and makes them feel that they're able to then succeed during the year is really fascinating. So all also the culture of learning that's presented to them in the classroom, how they feel, all sorts of things are really key to enabling children to feel that they're here with all they need to be able to thrive when they start the learning process. But one of the key aspects is to ask the child, if we ask a child when they hear a question that they know the answer to, then they're allowed to jump across. If we then ask another child a question that they don't know the answer to, then um, what they do is they go through this process of going into the pits to do their learning, their inquiry, they're finding out, they're solving the problem, and then eventually they come out when they have solved it. And what the children see is that both in those scenarios, both children start in the same place and finish in the same place. But the interesting thing to which is then can be very life transformational for them is to make them think that the child that knew the answer and jumped across the pit emotionally felt really good because as human beings we feel secure and emotionally really good when we know the answer. You know, children put their hands up. We always is humanely natural innate to want to. It makes us feel good when we know the answer to a problem. When we say to them, if you ask them, "Did you learn anything?" and they they for the first time in their lives they think that no, I didn't learn anything new because I already knew it. They start to realize that the only way to learn something new is to not know it first and to go through this process. Um, so that's a really exciting thing to share with the children, usually on day one of the Learning to Learn week, that really transforms the view of the learning process and makes them feel that they want to embrace not knowing, they want to embrace uncertainty, they want to embrace confusion because they know that that leads to finding things out that they already didn't know. And if we chatting about metacognition, I've got a lovely story from a child in year four when I was doing this once in my class, and we were doing this, and the child had jumped across, having known the answer, and um, and then he said, "Mistress, I think you're completely wrong. When I jumped across, I did learn something." And I said, "But that's impossible. If you jumped across, you it's because you already knew the answer." um, how is it that you learn something? And he said, it's very simple. When I jumped across, I learned that I already knew it. And I just thought that is, you know, to provide the conditions to share these models and to make children, um, immerse children in this kind of way of talking about learning and thinking about learning is so exciting because it makes them naturally to then think about their process of learning, which is what we call the metacognitive aspect, and to make it come alive as part of the everyday teaching and learning process. This model is fantastic for the teachers because they naturally make children feel able to discuss how their learning is going and their metacognitive process is alive at each stage. So just to give you a little example, Andrew, when children are here through the JONK approach, what happens is that they get very familiar, very used to talking about what they know that they know about what they're about to learn, but also what they know that they don't know about what they're about to learn. So that's already a natural discussion in the classroom with all the children contributing what they know that they know about the subject and what they know that they don't know. That whole sense of questioning, curiosity, and awareness of what they're about to learn. And then when the child realizes that there are certain things that they know they don't know, the magic then in learning comes with moving to two. So this is the intrinsic motivation that moves a child to two, because then they want to know what they know that they don't know. And that is so interesting because going from one to two is the key to launching into the learning. And if a child develops that intrinsic motivation of wanting to know what they know they don't know, is the key to all to the learning launching. And the reason why they want to know what they know they don't know is because they know that the school, the culture in the classroom, their peers, their staff, their resources, everything that's available to them when they're here makes them know how to know what they want to know that they know they don't know. And that is a fascinating connection of metacognitive thinking that is constantly open to the children at all times. They are thinking about these processes and enabling them to access the learning, to have a go at the learning. And 4 is a very metacognitive cycle, because at 4 they're constantly thinking whilst they're learning how the learning is going. So they're cycling, thinking, how is it going, successes, barriers, they need to change tack, need to change methods, all that sort of thing. But eventually they come to the realization metacognitively that they have answered the question, solved the problem, and they can move to 5. And in 5 is a metacognitive rich region as well, because in 5 they are encouraged to link 5 to 6. And this is the most interesting aspect of all. This is knowledge to wisdom, as I call it. So the difference between acquiring knowledge, but having the wisdom to be able to use that knowledge, or to understand it, or to master it, to use it in a different context, is so fascinating, to ask more questions of it, to develop the curiosity. So once you have acquired knowledge, can you give that meaning to your life? Can you use it to excite you with further inquiry and so on? So, yeah, it's a really, really lovely model um, that I think what it does is it brings to life the conversation about learning within the everyday scenario, and that's what I think is so valuable. And explicitly sharing these concepts with the children is so fascinating, because we move away from just sharing knowledge with them. We move into shaping them and sharing how to become effective lifelong learners um, from a very early age. So they are acquiring knowledge, but at the same time, we're molding them like a piece of clay on a wheel. We're molding each one into an effective lifelong learner.
I think it's elegant from several points of view. It gives teachers immediately a map, a roadmap for pedagogical design and delivery for planning and teaching. But every time I see that, I think of something different, and I think that's the power of a good model, because you see something new in the newer context in which you see it. And what struck me is that this also is a map for being able to address the individual needs of a child in a classroom through social connection. So for a child who says, I don't know that, and another child says, I've been through this, I know this already, there's the possibility of actually having the relationship that's horizontal, learning relationships that are horizontal in a classroom, that can position kids with other kids who have been through that journey before, as well as the teacher maybe being an instructional guide. So personalisation becomes possible with this map. But I always visualise this as a swimming pool and kids daring to get into the pool. When you first described, I'm a visual sort of metaphor type person, and then it's almost like swimming across, to take the courage to dive down to the bottom and then come back up and surface, and down to the bottom and surface, and ties in some of the processes that Sophie was talking about before as well. And then finally, just before they get out of the pool, am I okay? Is this really what I've learned? And then that when they climb out, they look back. They're at that point where they've moved through that. That to me is a bit of a metaphorical description of the way I see it. So
That's so fascinating, Andrew. And look at the next slide. It is a swimming pool. So the pit becomes exactly what you're describing. The analogy with the swimming pool is fascinating, because the way that they move so this is moving from 1 to 2, the engagement with the learner in the first place, is your analogy of the swimming pool. Some children, any child, may want to spend a little bit more time in the kind of learner pool, and the instructional pool, the toddler pool. getting a few more ideas, a few more bits of support, asking questions, maybe doing a little bit more research. So any child can launch by being here, being supported by peers or by adults. Some children may feel tentatively, but they want to go in one step at a time down the steps of the pool. As you say, some children may want to jump in, feel confident, just go for it. And some children may already be able to play intellectually at quite a deep level with that concept, and they would go to the diving board and jump into the deep end. So, absolutely, Andrew, that is so exciting. And the other thing that you've just said that's really, really exciting is this, that it connects the children, it connects the cognitive and the emotional aspect very, very, very closely. And there's no better example. This is the last page of the book because it's just so meaningful than this one, where this is a child in Spain, in Madrid, where the teacher has taken the whole young philosophy on board. And he sent me this. He said, "This is my interpretation of the process." And he's drawn himself with a friend, both smiling inside the pit, saying, "No lo sé, I don't know." And amazingly, has called it the pit of happiness. So I feel there's something very, very valuable and very um, tangible when one connects, um, when one makes the children make connections between the process of learning and the emotional side of their being. So and that's another reason why it's called the joy of not knowing, because I think, like Nelson Mandela beautifully quoted once, once you talk to a child in their language, it it goes to their heart, and so that kind of linking, seeing learning from a positive emotional position is the key. And setting up in the Learning to Learn week, setting up those communities of inquiry in the classroom, which are values led, children's rights led, lifelong learning dispositions led, um, that allows every child to feel valued and to feel able to thrive emotionally, socially, cognitively, culturally, um, and to feel respected and to feel free to take risks with their opinions, with their thinking, with their questioning is exactly what you're saying. Is that is they're all the ingredients that I see going into a pot that then enable the learning to happen.
Mm. While you're on that connection, it was a great comment video too. And Trevor McKenzie is someone else who's with us in EduSpark too. So you might want to link to some of his programs. But with that connection to emotion, in fact, I think there's a parallel shape with the emotional journey. So you've described a process of learning shape, which is, a V. I see this in adult learning in particular, and why a lot of people abandon self-directed asynchronous online courses. They get motivated either by curiosity, surprise, challenge, sometimes regret. We were talking about that before, but often a positive affect, a positive emotion of some sort, and they dive in. But then you get into confusion, lack of clarity. I'm not sure what I'm doing with this. You get into the grind of learning, which is that sort of the dip and the pit that you're talking about. And what sustains people through that are learning relationships, either with peers or with someone who knows that they're known and care. And that guiding hand is what makes that uncomfortable grind process okay, safe, and in fact eventually joyful. And then as they get to the other side, the emotion is, I'm starting to get this, I'm getting mastery, and there's that climbing out of the pool. So I think we see, besides the process, we see a parallel, positive to negative sort of journey, a sine wave almost through the and emotions are interlinked. If you don't connect emotions, there's no learning.
Yeah, absolutely. But the key in the emotion, which is so fascinating with the Jong approach, is that we say to the children that is brilliant that they don't know. And they say, well, no one's ever told me that. So he's giving them the permission to not know, to allow to feel celebratory, to be confused, to be uncertain, to not know. They absolutely love it, but that has to be accompanied by a lot of support, like you're saying, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of um, strategies and tools that are given to them through the learning to learn work that makes a child then feel safe in that position of not knowing. Because when we don't know, we feel uncomfortable. So what the whole of the junk approach does is it makes children then feel comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's a really lovely surprise. As we were saying, that's that surprise that children come to school and are allowed to feel confused and are celebrated for feeling unsure, and to embrace uncertainty, and to to be given that sense of excitement, because that's how the learning process happens, rather than that wanted to hold on to that sense of security of always knowing, of always being in the safe zone of, the Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. It's all about this, isn't it? Is if you stay within your zone, there's very little development. But the key is to go to the zone of proximal development with the adequate support. So I guess that's what we are creating, and we're also through this touching very much upon Einstein's amazing um, quote that he always used to say. Is such a deep uh, quote that he always used to use with his students. He says, I will never teach you. I will provide the conditions in which you can learn." And that's a really interesting quote, but which I've had Marcelo adaptation to that is that I feel it's not enough to give them the conditions in which they can learn. We also need to give them the conditions in which they will want to learn. And when we give them the conditions in which they will want to learn, as well as able to learn, then that's where the magic happens, Andrew. And every single story in the book is based upon those moments when the children have engaged in something that then has led to them producing something so totally extraordinary and so beyond the expectations that it makes you feel something is working well here in terms of how the learning is presented to them. If it's those moments when children take things way beyond what we were expecting or what the learning objective states. It's that limitless possibilities that arise in children's ability. And what fascinates me is that those moments are all intrinsically motivated. At no time those moments because a teacher says, "Oh, now you've done this, I want you to get there." No, those moments are moments where the child has done it and has then gone and explored or taken it way beyond the depth and breadth that anyone could have foreseen beforehand. So those moments. And the other thing, Andrew, that you're so perceptibly noticing in terms of relationships and the how useful that shape is to have in the classroom is that when the child gets to 5, having acquired the knowledge, they're very, very aware in joint classrooms that they have a choice. They can either explore it through an open-ended challenge or through um, uh, putting their knowledge in a different context or solving another problem, or they can choose to go back into the pit and help somebody that's still in there at 1, 2, or 3. And that's a sense of belonging, a sense of also a sense of understanding, because if you can explain the concept to someone else, then it shows that you have developed that understanding. But what I'm fascinated is their willingness to say, now that I've got to 5, I'd love to go and work collaboratively with a friend in the classroom to help them achieve that goal, the
Person
same
who
goal.
talks
So
the
yeah,
most. person who talks the most learns the most. So a
Yeah,
child is a teacher. Fabulous. Again, that sort of famous moment, I'm checking the clock as we move through. I'd love you to show the wheel that is the Learn to Learn week, and because that's the piece that we're moving to. That whole frame that you've just given us positions the overall idea that supports the book. So, what would you say? You gave us a little bit before. What is the Learn to Learn week, and why is it
absolutely.
so important?
I'll show you. I'll show the audience two wheels, if I may, Andrew, because this is the wheel that the Learning to Learn week launches. So if you imagine a wheel going into motion, the Learning to Learn week sets this wheel in motion. So what the Learning to Learn week does is it enables schools to devote 5 days. It could be is nominal 5 days. It could some schools do more, some schools do less. But it enables schools to plan their own days that are just devoted to setting the conditions in which children are able to thrive and learn and will want to learn. And what's that what's so key about the week is that all of this, the week allows all of this to be established before the curriculum launches, so the children are all feel equipped with everything they need to be able to succeed. And how that's done is that the Learning to Learn week helps a classroom to establish a values-based approach. And this is really interesting. I've done a lot of work with values-led approaches to education, where in the schools where I was senior leader in, replaced the actual school rules. We just had a set of values to live by. So if you establish a set of values in the classroom, and throughout the school, where everyone is friendly, caring, respectful, in this case, enthusiastic, courageous, and ambitious, that's really, really significant, because that's how everyone then is throughout the year. So if everyone is like this, then everything functions well, because this is how people are living through a values-led approach. And what that does, it has a very deep meaning, because what that does is enables children's rights to be met. And what's really exciting about that is that we are in the world of education, we are the conduits for enabling children's rights, which is the rights that every child has through the UNCRC Charter. Is every child in the world has those rights. And so the right to an education, to be listened to relax, to play, to be treated fairly, and so on, which are the ones on this list, can only be met if there's a values-led approach in the classroom. So the values allow the rights to be met. And it's only when the rights are met that the learning can happen. So then the students are introduced to um, how to be an effective lifelong learner. And then if we think about our role in education, what that leads to is our students, human beings who are then able to function and contribute to society and to all the different communities that they belong to, their individual, themselves, family, school, local, national, and more and more global communities. So that's the kind of ethos and vision of setting up a Learning to Learn week. But the actual process of the Learning to Learn week um, is very interesting, because it's divided into five kind of main elements, where we equip a child on day one with a series of models, like the one we've just seen, but also in day one, they create their own model of learning, which is really, really amazing, where they describe how they see themselves as a learner through a model. And that's amazing because it makes every child feel equally valued as a learner on day one of in the new classroom. They're created, they're displayed, they're illustrated, and then they put up on the wall on the first day, and that just is just amazing. And then the teacher uses those the language of each model to talk to the child throughout the year about their learning. That's incredibly exciting. And then we have the second day where the children are introduced to creative thinking techniques. Then they're introduced on the third day to how to structure their thinking visibly through mind maps and concept lines and fortune lines and traffic lights and all sorts of things. The fourth day is kind of the one I find most exciting, where the children are taught how to view learning through a philosophical lens. So the curriculum is presented to them through philosophical questioning, how they conduct inquiries in the classroom, how they develop their own thinking, but also how they see. Through philosophy, they learn to see and appreciate and value the views of others. It's really fascinating. And then the lifelong learning day on day 5, which introduces them to the lifelong learning dispositions and equips them with an ability to map themselves along the lines, along the concept lines of dispositions to see where where they feel they are along those lines. Let me just show you. I'll just show you how that works because that's really interesting. Yes, here. So the child during the learning to learn week maps themselves where they feel they are. These are the dispositions, these are the opposites. And then throughout the year, they keep mapping themselves. And at the end of the year, they map themselves again so they can see visually how they perceive that they have moved and improved as a lifelong learner. So let me just go back to because the key to the Learning to Learn week is that although there are some ideas presented, every school and every classroom in every school creates their own bespoke model and range of activities for each day. So this design of the sort of the tube map design shows that the although the sessions, the topics are more or less, research shows that these are really good ways of equipping children for the rest of the year. The actual tube stops could be anything at all that the school chooses. And also within the school, from reception to year 6, even the same activity will look slightly differently. So that's the kind of idea of the Learning to Learn week, and the value of it is tremendous. It really does pay off later on in terms of how children feel during the year. It's all about how they feel. This equips them with feelings that they feel able to, and they feel successful to succeed during the year.
It's what an unusual concept. Just spending a bit of time at the start of a
Mm.
40-week year setting up the culture, the process, the protocols, the expectations. Yeah, it makes so much sense when you see it, but just the focus, and I was talking with Sophie about this earlier, just the um, incessant focus on content and the acquisition of content at the expense of all this is the real shame that's going on. I think that's a brilliant introduction. What I'd love to do is just provide the opportunity for people to come off mute or to ask a question in anything that's coming up that you'd like to interrogate Marcelo about.
Sure. And just as we do that, and I love that, can I just share this lovely quote from a head teacher in Norfolk who, after um, setting up a Learning to Learn week in his school, wrote this, which is now the quote that launches the chapter in the book. And just pointed to this bit, staff have been telling me how much they have enjoyed it and how it has reminded them why we do this job in the first place. So there's something very special, not just for the children, but for the staff to then to feel that this week allows them to create something really special. And I also wanted to share this lovely quote from a child in year 5 after having gone through the Learning to Learn week and a year of the JONC approach. It's so powerful. It says year 5 is a special year for me, and I know for others too. Before I came to year 5, I thought when you learn, it's just about intelligence. But now I know it's about love for learning, creativity, happiness, and effort. So it brings us back to the beginning, doesn't it? What we're trying to do in education. I cannot think of 4 better words to describe our role in education, our role as practitioners, and our role of setting up students for life, to thrive for life, than Monica's quote here. So yeah, just wanted to share those two with the audience. But yes, absolutely. Any questions, any discussion, love to.
Sophie and Vidya, feel free to come off video and just come into a general discussion and ask any questions. What comes to mind, and what would be a single sentence that could capture what you're thinking at the moment? It might take a bit to process, but how would you say what you've seen in a single sentence?
Before that, I would like to ask a question, because, like, I have asked in his earlier session also, like the learning to learn week is something like first week models of learning. I mean, first Monday it is models of learning, creative thinking, visible thinking, philosophy, lifelong learning. We had a question with Maslow, like, because when we talk about lifelong learning, we set our thinking dispositions, everything. That's kind of goal setting, which we do in the starting of our inquiry units.
Hmm.
So we asked this question with Marcelo: can we interchange the learning to learn week everyday activities? And he said his answer. Please, Marcelo, once again, I would like to hear.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Vidya, for that. Yes, I love the way that you have taken the idea, the principle, and that you're shaping it in to align with your process, with your systems, with your learning. And I love the idea that you are connecting the dispositions with the main things that drive the students need to drive successful inquiry. I think that's fascinating, and I just love the freedom that you're using to use the Learning to Learn week in a flexible way, so that it actually meets your needs. But yeah, anything at all that I can help with in terms of helping you to actually set it up in more detail and depth, please let me know. Yes, the other thing that's just come up, the student-led inquiry, is that the other thing that happens in the Learn to Learn work that is that children become uh, given the responsibility of learning leaders in various ways. So the learning leaders then work very strategically with the senior leadership team. So they become very involved with how the strategic vision and the learning process within the school functions, and it's just incredible. You've seen the book. There's minutes from their meetings with the headship and senior leadership team, and how they influence, and the ideas that the teachers have in terms of uh, how to make the learning to maximize the learning experiences from the children's point of view. And my most memorable moments from headship is seeing children run into the school on an inset day, on a holiday day for them, coming in with their families to sit with the teachers and work in their own groups, discussing the strategic plans for the school. It was just amazing, from reception to year 6.
We treat kids as second-class citizens almost. You know, we'll tell you what we will tell you what to learn,
Exactly.
and what to wear, and when to turn up, and you know, it's so exciting to hear true agency, and I think actually this is one of the reasons why people are so uncomfortable with uncertainty and change as adults. It's the result of the education system that they've experienced themselves, and so we carry this lens with us that all of this is uncomfortable. So we transmit this. It's not good to be uncomfortable through that own experience, which has been shaped by an education system that isn't meeting the needs of the world at the moment. So, you know, that's my little soapbox moment, and I just love the opportunity. I would love to see this grow so that we can begin to white ant those structures of education that are not fully inclusive of children and their agency in the classroom. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It is the most inclusive way of enabling every child to feel an expert in learning and an expert that's contributing to the whole. So it's like a jigsaw. Every child forms part of that jigsaw. Yes, and it's so exciting because the learning agency, with all the children's views, then form a children's version of the school development plan. So the children write their own school development plan based on the school's plan, but interpreted by them. It's so amazing. And the model that's also presented, Vidya and Sophie, on day one is the analogy with architecture. So in architecture, an architect starts with a very detailed plan, and then they source very experts, plumbers, electricians, plasterers, to make that plan come true. In education, it's the same. The school has very detailed plans. And what's shared with the children is that they are then the expert plumbers, electricians. So everyone brings their uniqueness to help the teacher's plans come true. And it's such a lovely analogy, because to build something, you need different experts. And every child is then feels that they're an expert, contributing their own passions, interests, experiences into the mix, and makes the plans come true. So yeah.
Sophie, I think you're trying to say something, but your mic is not working at the moment because you've changed the audio, I think. So haven't got sound for you coming through. So I know that you want to contribute something there, and no, that's not better. I can lip read now.
Maybe write it on the chat.
Yeah, write it into the chat, because we probably haven't got time for that, unless you pull your headphone out, and maybe that will work. Sometimes that triggers the system to do.
While Sophie types, no, I would like to concentrate. I mean, give this to. I was reading. We were reading Misty Patterson's pop-up studio book. She used the term pedagogical artist. So when Maslow says we are the tradesmen of the education kind of thing, so I could connect to that. We are all pedagogical artists.
Pedagogical actors. Brilliant phrase.
Yeah.
I love it. Absolutely brilliant. Yes, I love it so much. That is, yeah, a wonderful phrase. And but given the children that sense of stage in the classroom is so wonderful as well. So wonderful to feel that everyone is taking part in the play, and we've all got all our parts. What a wonderful analogy and model, Video. I love it so much. And it really reminds me of, because in the morning, of one of the things that I have found makes a huge difference to how the children feel coming into school, is to welcome them with an open-ended challenge, or thinking skill starter, as they became known. And they were so powerful that very early on in my career, I put them all together and developed this book called Start Thinking, where it's just a selection of all the starters to welcome them with. So that's the morning. It starts with something that every child can succeed with. and share and feel success even before the formal learning has happened. But in the afternoon video, I wanted to find something similar, and I developed the idea of performances. So the first 10-15 minutes in the afternoon after coming in from play, it's the time where children can perform anything they like. So I remember just sitting at my desk with a cup of coffee and listening to a child play the violin or tell a joke or read a poem, or, it was just incredible how the effort that they would put in for those performances and how it made them feel. That sense of stage that you were saying, it's just phenomenal. So yes, you're very, very, very insightful observation there, Vidya.
Yeah. We've just at the point where we need to wrap up, and for a couple of reasons, but Marcelo, I think this group in particular could jam with you for a long period of time. And one of the things that I'd love to do is to set up a couple of these sessions inside the JONK course, the Joy of Not Knowing course inside EduSpark. I think this will certainly be a YouTube out on a video on YouTube, which will trigger more conversation. But I think there's a place for this. One of the visions I've got is to have a live event which becomes a bit of a conference around metacognition. And this idea of metacognition maybe in the Maldives might be something as an event to run. Vidya, you may not be aware that we are running long form. You talk about lifelong learning, Marcelo. I talk about long learning, a bit like slow food. We think of the slow food movement where we're present and we're connected to our food, its source, the process of cooking, the process of eating and celebrating. And I like that as a metaphor as compared with fast food and this obsession we've got with get a course done quickly, tick and flick, watch a video, do a quiz, that sort of low level, superficial, almost no learning. And so we're looking at these long events where we get some pre-work, create the community, very similar to what you're doing, where we set up the ways of working, an immersive event, and then the ongoing development of people change. So we're using very similar models.
Can I leave you with a little thought, since this is metacognition? And
Please do. Please do.
Ponder one of those surprises. Yeah, what you were saying, one of those surprises, because metacognition makes us think of having to think about our learning and how our learning is going. But I just want to leave you with a thought of the opposite of metacognition, which is where I think the best learning happens. So if you imagine a child in the EYFS, they are learning beautifully and very successfully through play. But I think I would just want to leave you with this thought: the key to their learning in early years is that they don't realize that they're learning. So I wanted to say that the metacognition is an important aspect, but I wanted to leave you with the thought that I also think that the best learning happens when the children don't realize that they're learning.
Yep, 100% agree.
And however old they are, this is when they play, when they play intellectually.
Yeah, no, absolutely would agree 100%. That's another conversation of the interplay. That's another model that's forming in my head listening to you. We've got to stop. So look, it's absolutely fabulous. A joy to speak to you, to use a word in your title. We'll put in the YouTube video and in the video here on EduSpark a link to your book. Vidya, I'd love to connect with you further and have a chat one day, and we'll catch up. Sophie, it's a pleasure. You're one of my great friends in the world, and in fact, it's great to have you connecting in a four-way. It feels a bit like one of those TV shows. What was the TV show where all the children were in these vertical and horizontal, the Brady Bunch. Remember
Oh,
the Brady
yes.
Bunch? I sort of feel like this is a bit of a Brady Bunch. Sophie doesn't remember that. You've got to look it up. It's my childhood. But fabulous to have you all along. We had a few other people drop in and drop out, but it's just fabulous to be able to have these conversations. And I look forward to the next one with you. And if you're seeing this on YouTube or in EduSpark, would love a comment and a question that we can bring back to Marcelo at some point further.
And I thank you, Andrew, so much. And I really hope that people enjoy the course that's now on EduSpark. And it leads to lots more conversation. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to form part of the recording today.
Brilliant. This will go into your John course too, by the way. I think, Marcelo, it's a good way for it to work. So stay well, stay happy, stay happy with not knowing that you know stuff, or with knowing that you don't know stuff. So, yeah, great to chat, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vidya. Thanks, Sophie. Thank you so much, Marcelo. Bye.
Thank you.